left Van Halen, it was not something that I was delighted to do. I was not celebrating, I was not relieved. It was one of the scariest moments in my life. I perceived that Van Halen was heading towards catastrophe. So did he ride that plane all the way into the sand? I said no. We'd already been through a year's worth of the Hatfields and McCoys with the bottle of moonshine in between. And I'm not a prince. I am not Mr. Not Guilty at all. But the chemistry between us was becoming morbid. It was becoming threatening and non-productive. You can hear it in the music. It started turning melancholy right after I left. And that's great. There's plenty of room for melancholy music, but it's not my personal constitution. It took me a long time to figure out what to do as far as staying in Van Halen. When I left, I had a screenplay that I'd been working on with a couple of other fellas, but no movie deal. I did not have any movie company behind me or any musicians. I had no equipment to rehearse with or anything. It wasn't until some 3-4 months later that I put together a band. It was sometime after I left Van Halen, but I had nothing to leap to. I had nothing specific that was beckoning or that promised to be greater than. It was a question of watching a great bird auger in. And as time went by, there was more and more backbiting, more and more mudslinging, most of it coming from their vocalist and his management. And here we currently reside, 13 years later. Same mudslinging, same kind of thinking from their camp. So I guess the most critical decision I have to make is, do I really describe some of their carryings-on the road? Or do I continue to be the quiet guy? Do I continue to be the nice guy? 99% of all the hijinks and carrying on was my contribution. But everybody had a proclivity. Everybody had a little sidebar to their story. It's unfortunate that this feuding has continued all the way up until the present, because what Van Halen meant to a lot of people, and myself in particular, was very positive. What it meant in the early days, read the time period that I was involved in the band, is hanging in there like an Indian summer. It's still all over the radio, still in the magazines, people still ask questions about the breakup. I guess the best I can say is, don't believe every syllable of everything that you read by everybody who wrote it. Go out and buy those records and see if you can hear the truth in the music. That's my recommendation. Some of those records you may have to buy twice, just in case you want your best pal to listen in too, so you can discuss it some more. Dolomite, motherfucker! Isn't it curious what we read about Gene Simmons now that he's put it out his own book? Gene Simmons chasing after Ed, how he asked Ed if he wanted to join Kiss by 1981, 82. There you are. Dolomite, motherfucker. At a Thanksgiving dinner, it must have been 6 years ago, we were talking about the band. Most of my family was at the table in Pasadena. My father said, "You mean you guys haven't communicated at all?" I said, "No, Pop, not at all." 2 days later, my pop calls me up and says, "Hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of calling Ed Van Halen." Well, this is a Roth kind of way of thinking. I'm going to help you whether you want it or not. I'm going to help you even if it kills you. I froze because I knew what was coming. I said, "Pop, you shouldn't have done that." I said, "There's so much anger and hatred in the air coming out of those guys. Who knows how that's going to be translated?" Lo and behold, a week later, there's a full page in the Star and in the Inquirer. Ed Van Halen saying, "Dave Roth is trying to weasel his way back in the band. He's destitute. Even tries to have his father call me. Who does he think he is?" That kind of thing. I think the biggest victim of that page was my father. He was just trying to do what doctors do. He was being a dad. But that was seized upon and turned into a daytime soap. So I'm very careful as to how we approach each other. But I've always felt, let's protect the story a little bit. Let's protect the legend a little bit. Because it's very positive. I stayed back from the backbiting and the screw you and you're a bad guy-isms and whatnot for a number of years. And then about 4 years ago on Howard Stern, I really laid into them. Said everything that I thought at the time. I didn't say it quite as nicely. Their new lineup to me is not of interest. And Ed Van Halen without a guitar in his hand is a crummy human being. I'm not a junior psychiatrist. Why do people behave like they do? I think everybody was hurt. Everybody in the band felt let down. Everybody in the band felt abandoned. I felt the same thing that they were feeling. Two opposites become the exact same thing. Well, Dave was working on something else. No, that's what Ed was doing. How far back are we going to go? Historically, how far do we go here? Are we talking about this week only? It's just damned unfortunate that it's got to continue for this many years. I don't have a fantasy. I'm not waiting for the band to reconvene. I'm not waiting to do a grand reunion, and I'm certainly not sitting here thinking about stepping on stage and how that's going to feel with them for 4 minutes come Rock and Roll Hall of Fame time. See, I don't know how far to go with the Van Halen story because everybody has domestic bliss. Everybody has domestic rest. Kids, 40 acres and a mule. I got one smoking passport, enough financial wherewithal to get me anywhere on the map, and then enough for a new suit to wear when I get there. And if you go with me, I'll buy all the drinks. So how far do you go? Because I recollect Ed Van Halen, it is his wife's wedding. Now there's a slip. Last time I ran into them on the streets of New York was 3-4 years ago. I didn't recognize them. Just out of the corner of my eye. You know how I walk, with my ball cap down around my eyes, my sunglasses. Walk very softly in mean streets. I'm heading down Madison Avenue. It's 9 a.m. Somebody walks by and goes, "Hey, Dave." I think, that sounds familiar. I turn and I look, and a full block away on the corner is a fat guy waving his arm. He goes, "It's Ed, Dave." I didn't recognize him. He's gained 30 pounds. When a dozen years go by. 30 pounds. Or was that Valerie? And I said, all my life in front of my eyes, look who's here now. Ed, how are you? And Valerie said, "He's fine." Now you know the whole conversation. He says, "Oh, I hear you're playing with Terry." This was a mutual friend that we grew up with. "Oh yeah. How's it going?" "It's going good. I hear that you're a dad. Congratulations." I wanted desperately to ask who the father was, but it was not a time for levity. Now, how am I going to write about Ed Van Halen, whose white suit, that was my wedding present to him, his tailed white tuxedo, custom made, is what he wore to his wedding. Cut to upstairs at the reception, the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Ed and I are doing blow and taking turns holding each other around the waist so we don't plunge headfirst into the toilet from dry heaving. When you pack in a good Keith Richards-sized thumbnail full and it drains right down the back, hits the old gag reflex. You sound like a Honda 125 on a cold morning. Anyway, I don't know that Ed was tuned into the business side and greed side of what was happening around him. And I, having watched every blaxploitation movie ever made, knew every possible scam on Earth. I always felt that if you kept it in-house, it made it more special. Nevertheless, Ed pursued a number of outside projects. Made-for-TV movies for his wife, Valerie, a movie with Sean Penn's brother called The Wildlife, solo works with Alan Holdsworth and Brian May, a variety of interests. The ultimate being when I came back from vacation at one point, and I was in a parking lot in Santa Monica. The 7-Eleven, there were a couple of butch Mexican gals with doors open to their pickup truck, and the new Michael Jackson song Beat It came on. I heard the guitar solo and thought, now that sounds familiar. Somebody's ripping off Ed Van Halen's licks. It was Ed, turns out, and he had gone and done the project without discussing it with anybody. Feeling as though I would stand in the way, which actually, in that echelon of company, I wouldn't have at all. Quincy Jones is stellar company. Great, go play it. Don't waste it on Nicolette Larson or Gene Simmons. If you're going to do something, climb the big one. But this was all done behind the scenes. It had become secretive at that point. And it was at that time that I said to myself, hey, how many solo projects will he do while I stand here guarding the gate of dreams worth dying for? Saying, no, I'm not going to act. I'm not going to write. I'm not going to be on television. I'm not going to be on anybody else's record. I'll just be straight away with Van Halen. It was at that point I said, maybe I'll do something on the side as well. Certainly nothing that would conflict with what we were about as Van Halen, but I'll keep my eyes open. It was some months later when I was in Mexico with my trusted assistant, Ed Anderson. We were sitting under a thatched roof, empty little bar out in Playa Blanca, looking out upon the sea, and the Beach Boys were on the stereo. Ed said to me, you should do this song. It was California Girls. I said, great, let's pursue it. I was very careful to keep the band posted every single step of the way as to what I was doing, so that I would not be operating in the shadows. Then I went ahead to do the Crazy from the Heat EP. But ultimately what did happen in terms of the fracture of Van Halen came in '84, after sitting around for the better part of a year trying to make an album. When I talk about trying to make an album, I'm sitting with Ted Templeman outside of Ed's backyard studio for 4 or 5 days in a row in the summer. We would sit on this little bench for hours waiting for Ed to pick up the phone in his bedroom, knowing he was in there, but he wouldn't pick up. He'd been up all night working on his own version of a mix for a song or working on a tune for one of Valerie's TV movies. It was at that point that I determined if we're going to have so many gaps of time, hey, life's too short to drink bad wine. Maybe I get involved in something else during the interim. I never perceived that I was going to do something else and leave Van Halen. It was instead of, hey, I got a reason to get up every morning, there'd be weeks where there's no reason to get up. Nobody's going to answer the phone. Nobody's going to show up in the studio. If they are, they're going to be bleary-eyed, sullen, and argumentative, which are group therapy words for acting like Spinal Tap. Fuck you being the operative word of every sentence. Wow, that's the sound of one hand clapping for some people. So I created my Crazy from the Heat EP in 4 days and went on vacation. We'd struggled for a year to make an album, 1984. I mean struggled through the type of ludicrous behavior where I'm sitting with a producer in one studio in Hollywood while Ed and the engineer are in another studio. Working all night, not getting up during the day, threatening to burn the master tapes if we don't desist, or something's not returned, it's going to get destroyed. Please, it's only music. It's only rock and roll. But it turned to a lot of alcohol-fueled wasted time, a lot of wasted calories. Third basic law of thermodynamics. Heat expended will not be replaced. Spent it going up the stairs, going down the stairs, you're not getting it back. Sorry, tracing your steps gets you nothing more than more calories expended. Got back from vacation, nothing's going on with the band. Things are delayed, as usual. Great. We'll make a video for California Girls. Something I had not expected to do. I made the video, was ready to start with Van Halen come New Year's, as per the plan. Gonna be driving a couple 3-week delays, somebody's going across country, somebody's getting married again, whatever. I said, great, but I'm not gonna sit here with my dick in my hand. The other hand trying to retune the clock. I'm gonna make a video for Just a Gigolo. I'd not expected to do that, but let's not throw away more of my life. A good barometer that I learned from working in surgery in a hospital is, what if you're dying? What if you have something that's going to kill you in a determined length of time, and I throw that little ticket in front of you and say, just waste 3 weeks? I don't think so. It's my barometer. Every day that I wake up in bed feeling a little tired, a little cranky, I think, what if I had AIDS? What if I had a tumor? Or Lou Gehrig's disease? At the same time I said, you know what? What if we made a script for a movie? Because MTV was wide open at the time. Anything that was good or colorful or interesting got some kind of rotation on the channel. I started writing a movie script, sat around the Van Halen offices while everybody else was involved in whatever personal issue they were struggling with. It took some 5 weeks preparation to do the California Girls video. When that was done, we finally started writing songs for the new Van Halen album. The music was turning morose, probably because of individual personal habits more than anything else. And you can hear it on their succeeding albums. The arguments became more and more vehement, loud, and venomous, with threats, hands balling into fists. I said, okay, since there's so many breaks in time, so many times there's no answered phone calls, I'll make another video. I'll wait till everybody does arrive back in Hollywood to make the new album. And I started to create Just a Gigolo. Came time to release the video, and I ran into a routine that a lot of drinkers practice. It's called Selective amnesia. Selective amnesia is where you select what you're going to forget. So here's Ed, crying at his baby grand piano in his little studio, 5150. But you didn't tell me that you were going to release California Girls. Well, yeah, I did, Ed. Why else would I spend that much money and recruit that much talent? Yeah, but I don't remember. This on the heels of easily half a dozen private projects of his own. I did not want to be guilty of any kind of subterfuge. I was always a protector of that band, so I made sure, goddamn sure, that everybody knew. And I also knew that memories were short when diluted, so I'd repeated my plan again and again. Nevertheless, when I released California Girls and Just a Gigolo on New Year's Eve of 1985, the cry was, oh my god, we didn't know about this. We don't remember you telling us about this. All this transpired in the interim, a major interim, but I figured sooner or later this circus was going to reconvene. We worked on what was to be the next Van Halen, probably early 85. There were constant delays and screaming. It sounded like a sack of sick cats. And that's what rehearsal was like. That's what trying to write the songs was like. Somewhere around March, it came to a head. I wanted to play live, they did not, particularly Alex. He wanted to play half a dozen stadium gigs, keep it very low key. I can't even begin to say hello in 6 shows. I'm the guy who always had the band rehearsing for 2 months before we go out on the road. So we went our separate ways. My contingency being, well, I have a script. Had not shopped it to a company yet. I certainly didn't have a band or any musicians to deal with. My design originally being, well, we'll do this movie and we'll have Van Halen do the music. Wow, what a 1-2 punch. That was not to be. So I had to scurry around, come up with a handful of musicians, created what we'll call the Yankee Rose Band. Players like Greg Bissonette, Bill Sheehan, and Steve Vai. My other choice was to commit to poetic felonies, wind up doing melancholy power ballad. No way. The chemistry had turned rotten. So where do you go? Ed and I hugged each other and cried at my father's house. I said, Ed, your brother's up to 2 6-packs a day. Maybe if we get ourselves square, down the line we can reconvene, and I would love nothing more than that. I don't think he understood. We went our own ways.